worked the satin stitch and then the couching over the top on the leaves, I've used the red thread in the centre of this strawberry, and then I walked across to the other strawberries that use it by putting in a little seeding stitch on the way. And so I put a seeding stitch, travelled from here, seeding stitch here in the stem, and then I worked this centre of the strawberry, which just uses a little bit of the red, and then down to this one and used it up and then cast off here. So that is one thread. So I've used the orange on this one, and I've just run out of thread here. And as you can see, I started in the centre and worked one side of that strawberry in a satin stitch. Right, so I'm now going to let you just carry on working the strawberries, all the strawberries in the same method, and using little seeding stitches over the top of them, which is very straightforward as well. So now I'm going to leave this satin stitched area because the mood is taking me elsewhere, and I'm going to satin stitch the chest and belly of the bird, which is shown step by step here. And this is this area, and it's all marked on for you in with printed lines in the blue. So if you go to your stitch chart, you'll see that that's colour F, and colour F is fawn. So I'm going to break open a new wool. Now I always just organise all my wools in colours and you know, shading from dark green to mid green to pale green to yellow back up to orange. It's just something that I find visually appealing, and it inspires me, and it rather echoes the things that we're doing on the actual piece. So I'm going to go for the fawn, and that is this one. So it's the second one up here, and I'm taking away the cream and the mid brown and the darker brown. And then you just slip this little cap off and undo the skein, which has been folded within itself, and just shake that out and open it. So what you're going to get now is one long loop. So we open it again and again, and then just let it hang. Now ideally you just let that hang overnight. That's a sort of tip really, and the wool will straighten itself out and any of these kinks will just disappear. So the next thing I'm going to do is to just snip off the end where you see there's a knot, and I'm going to leave the knot end sitting on the skein so I can always find that end, and then take the cut end and just gently allow that to split away from the wool. Now this is a double thread, so what I'm going to take is all the way from the point of my finger to my elbow, fold it over and take the same length again. Now when I snip this, I'm going to actually just leave that snipped end hanging to the side so I can always find it very easily. Then thread up as usual, and when you thread, just put the needle into the loop at the end, hold the loose ends and just stretch it slightly, give it a little bounce, and that means you can just test and assess how much give there is in the wool, and you'll find that this wool has a lot less give than the Appleton's wools. So I'm going to be very careful when I put my stitches in, particularly in satin stitch, to make sure they're lying flat. So thread up so that your loop is at the far end away from the needle as usual, and then just pop in your needle into the body of the bird. So I'm just casting on in the next door area to where I'm starting, and then just come up through the loop as usual, and then pop your needle down and pull. Now I'd say that this design is actually beginner, intermediate and advanced, because there is an advanced stitch at the end if you want to choose that advanced stitch. I don't choose that because I actually find more joy in working the simpler metal thread stitch, but if you love Elizabethan stitches you might want to do the slightly more challenging version. Now I'm going to follow the stitch instructions and just come up sort of to the left side of his belly and down on the right side. So I'm always going down on the important edge. So this is the bit where you really want to cover it and make sure that it's quite neat. This area here will be covered with long and short soft shading, and you can just slide the edge stitches off over any untidy edges. So I'm going to come up at one side and then down at the other, and that's just echoing what's here on the stitch instructions. So you'll see that you divide the area in half with the first stitch, like that, and that's over a printed line, and then just continue working one half and then the other. Now I'm using a double thread for speed really, and because this wool is fairly thin and it really does lie very flat. It's rather beautiful. Now just remember to keep that angle. It's very tempting to flatten your angle and work across a shape like that, but of course you cover far more if you keep the stitches angled. And if you look at old embroideries, you'll find that they're all stitched for speed really, and effectiveness. Certainly for the embroidery that was stitched by the professionals. The amateur embroiderer, of course, had all the time in the world to stitch and take a huge amount of trouble over making everything look perfect. Alright, so I've worked my way to the top of there, then I just put a seeding stitch in just to secure that top thread, and then come down below here. And just check that your thread isn't twisting. And if it does, just take the ends and just pull them individually like that, and you'll find that they flatten. Just make sure they're the same tension between the needle and the linen as well. And I know I'm going to run out of this just as I need the last about 3 stitches. But one of the things you'll be surprised about is this line here comes all the way from there right up here. So that's using a lot of thread, and I might just put a little cheat stitch in there, Karen, just to make sure that's well covered. One thing about crewel work is that you can go down in the same hole more than once. So using a twill linen in particular, you can actually go down again and again and again in the same hole, and you'll find once your piece comes off the frame, that hole will just shut. It'll just shut like that. We're not actually going to block this piece because it's using metal thread and spangles, which of course are metal. So there I go, that's my first thread in the fawn, and then I'll finish that before I move on to the next bit. If you notice, when I bring my needle through, even though I've stitched quite a lot on this piece and I've left it overnight, this linen is lovely and hollow sounding, and when you bring the needle through you can hear it. You hear this pop. So every time you hear that pop, you know that your linen is lovely and tight. When you get to the edge of satin stitch area here, you can come up and down in the same hole. So this is my penultimate stitch here, up then down, and there's a tiny bit of belly showing there. So I'm going to come up in the same hole as that previous stitch and go down in the same hole here, and I'm just going to put my fingernail in the way, and that should just curve around his little belly like that. So nope, that hasn't really worked all that well. Let's have a look. Might put another stitch behind that, so going back up the shape there. That's better. Now he's got a little fat belly. I rather like that. And the blue that's showing underneath is of course his leg, so that's stitched separately. Now next you could work his legs, because you can work those any time at all, because you can use the body to cast on and cast off with and secure the thread, or you can use the wings. But I'm going to come down his body here, his head and his body, just so that you can see how I would work it.